There's a slim Arctic breeze wafting through your computer case. So let's take a look at the Arctic P14 Slim. So first, some spec information. This is 16 millimeters thick. The usual slim fans that I've taken a look at least to this point, have been 15 millimeters. So it's got a little bit of extra thickness, but it shouldn't really affect anything for most computer cases that this would be stuck into. You got their amperage, the RPM range, the CFM, millimeters of H2 by their reading, sewn, and a 6-year warranty. Alright, here is the P12 Slim. It is 15 millimeters thick. It has no rubber pads on it. So that means any vibrations you get in the fan will be transmitted into your frame. But in my testing, it didn't really seem to have too much vibration. And it's less of an issue now than when you're age of the hard drives. So if you're going to mount this in a case with hard drives, I would just get some foam and mount it that way. But this sort of slim design is meant for your small form factor cases in general more so. The blade design is very reminiscent of the regular P14. It's just skinnied up. It has a fairly small hub in the middle. The back, these struts are pretty small and they've got a big sweep angle to them to help reduce that the sound as the blades pass over them. The blades sit right up against the front of that hub, so it's nice and tight, so it might be noisy in radiators in a pull configuration or up against your case grills or anything like that, just because it'll sit really close to it. It does have a ring around the outside. This means that the blades have a perfect distance to, well, this ring, but there is a small gap between the ring and the rest of the frame. So some back pressure can still go through, but overall it means that this fan will be fairly versatile in any sort of application. Mind, it does have ones that it'll be more optimized for, but it would still do okay as a radiator fan. Just don't expect it to perform as well as thicker fans. And certainly will work in like air coolers, as case airflow, what have you, for anything. And one thing I didn't note before is that this has more, well, blades than the regular P14. And that is likely because it is a narrow fan. So to keep the performance similar, Arctic opted for more blades rather than keeping the blade count the same. This does mean that frequency-wise, it's probably shifted towards the high end because more blades tend to mean a higher pitch down. And we'll see that from all the tests. First test we're going to take a look at is the case simulation test. This is airflow going through your computer case. So the way I mentioned this is most people are going to stick it into a small form factor computer case or use it, well, in that small form factor computer case on an AIO. That's how I envision someone using it, but let's pretend for a moment that we're going to use it in a more airflow-oriented environment. So mini iTech's case, front to back airflow, open type design. Maybe the GPU is on the back side of that motherboard, so it has clean air flowing through it. Still an air cooler somehow in this imaginary computer case. This would be the 6S mark that you'd want to pay attention to. The 6S mark would also be relevant towards if you had fans in the bottom of your computer case blowing up towards your GPU. That's where you'd want to pay attention to it. Then we got the 9-inch mark. This is compact towers. Think a case that can hold an ATX motherboard, but not a lot of extra room there. 220 millimeter class fans would fit across its length. So if you're building in that kind of case, focus on that data point. Then we got the 11-inch mark. This would be your mid-tower computer cases. Think a case that can hold 320 millimeter class fans or a standard 360 AIO. Then we have the 14.5-inch mark. This would be your large towers. 340 millimeter class fans would be that size factor. Think something like the Frac Design Torrent. So when comparing airflow going through a case, I want something that is normalized to compare to. So I have my control fan. It is 3 parts A12X5 to 1 part A14. And that is this triangle dyne. The P14 Slim underperforms pretty dramatically compared to the control fan. Of course, we're comparing a slim fan to a regular one. When we take a look at things at 100% PW fan signaling, once again, the P14 Slim is just overall underperforming, except for when we're at truly large towers, which is actually fairly impressive for such a slim fan. There's less room for it to direct airflow. So how does it compare against other fans? Well, on here, I have a teal line with the square boxes, and that's the regular P14. They test really darn close to each other. The P14 beats it out in bigger cases, but not much beyond that. They are very close overall and compared to each other. As far as positioning goes, when we compare it against other fans, they are underperforming overall. They're just other fans that are significantly more performant than them in case airflow across all data points. At the 18 decibel noise normalized mark, once again, they're just other fans that greatly outperform them, and in particular, the P14 regular has distanced itself more from the P14 slim. So as it gets a little bit noisier, so higher noise levels, so more air speed, they just separate out more. So it's able to drive more air. Take a look at it in bar graph form. Here's the slim. Well towards the bottom, they're just, once again, just reiterating that point. Looking at things at 100% PW fan signaling, and the slim is just well towards the bottom. It just doesn't generate enough RPM, enough push to be a top-ranked fan. It is well towards the bottom. Mind, I would like to note that the fan is remarkably, or the line is remarkably flat, meaning that whatever Arctic did in its design really focuses the airflow, which is something I personally like to see. Focusing on specific RPM, so 800 RPM for this fan, it is only at 5.4 decibels. It is quieter than most of the other fans on this graph, with only a few exceptions. Now, the amount of airflow that it generates at that noise level is on the low side. It just doesn't generate enough air. The P14 original is, well, more than twice as loud, but it also generates almost twice as much airflow, so you do have to pick and choose what is the most important aspect of the fan to you, and that is why I'm presenting this data. At 1,500 RPM, the P14 Slim is ranked last of the subsample selection of fans that I've selected for this, well, graph. It's not too noisy, it just doesn't generate quite enough airflow. Not saying it's bad. It's a slim fan, so you have to take it all with a grain of salt, and it's the only slim 140 millimeter class fan that I've tested thus far. So I have nothing else to compare it against, whether this is good or bad. But compared to regular fans, it is on the bad side. So if you have room for a full thickness fan, use that. If you only have room for something slim, well, go with it, because it's what's available, I guess. Take a look at noise versus decibels. It's off the good fan selection, no surprise, at the 9-inch mark. Taking a look at Sohn, I have a whole piece on my channel about Sohn. If you're interested in it, please watch it. But the end result is that higher noise levels tend to get stretched off to the right side here. So it exemplifies, shows off just how noisy they are, while decibels tends to compact higher noise levels. Arctic push. Arctic pull. Now we're on to performance through my CPU air cooler, the U12A, and it's functionally equivalent in terms of airspeed as the Black Ice Nemesis 140 GTX. Now I am only able to measure in air speeds as opposed to adding thermal data. It is just a limitation with my channel at this time. I don't have enough finances to afford to buy several test systems to allow me to generate that thermal data. So if you like the idea of this channel, like where it's going, please think about becoming a YouTube member or sending me a super or becoming a patron, all that goes directly into the fund to, well, buy that stuff or buy fans from manufacturers who, well, won't send me their products that you all would like to see me test. So I also understand that it's hard to ask for people to, well, give me money. So just doing that subscribe button, giving me a like, does go a long way. Telling your friends about this channel so that more people watch it, all that really does just go a long way in helping support this channel. So thank you. Back to what we're seeing here. We have meters per second versus RPM. This is a blade efficiency graph. It is how good is this blade geometry design at shoving air through, well, something with resistance, like a radiator heatsink. And it's a little bit underneath my control fan, but it's overall not that far off, indicating that despite this being such a slim fan, it's actually very effective at a given RPM. Now, when we're taking a look at airspeed versus decibels, it just doesn't do as well. It's too noisy for how much airspeed it gets. So once again, it comes back to, if you only have room for the slim fan, it'll do the job. Otherwise, fit a full thickness fan that is of better quality. Back to my point of Noctua U12A air cooler versus the radiator. This is not to say that the performance that you'd get using either one of them would be equivalent. They won't be. I'm almost 99.99999% sure, despite having not tested them at all. It comes down to surface area and other factors with thermal transfer between the different, well, fluids. But this is indicating that the air speed, the resistance of air, pushing air through the cooling device, i.e. the heatsink or radiator, are very similar. The radiator apparently was slightly easier for the air to be pushed through, which surprised me. But I'm calling them functionally equivalent through most of my testing because most other fans are closer in line with each other. But I just want to disclose this data to show off the testing as I build up that the radiator test data suite. So we're going to compare noise normalized value through the coolers. And the blue line is my noise normalized 11 decibel mark, while the red lines are the 18 decibel mark, so a slightly higher noise level. So 11 you can think of as completely silent, just about. It's barely at where you would hear it, while 18 decibels is a little bit over that, where it would still not be unpleasant, but it would be more of a whooshing sound going through your computer case. So it's up to you to decide which is most important to you. The Slim is largely underperforming compared to most of the fans. They are scaled based off of that 11 decibel mark. So at higher noise levels, the Slim actually would rank quite a bit higher. But I didn't scale it that way. So, I mean, I could scale it whichever way you want, and I could separate this into two graphs. So if you would prefer that in the future, I can do that. Just leave it in the comment section down below. This is the way I did it for this one. So it's a little bit noisy for the amount of performance it gets. At the 800 RPM mark, the Slim, let me explain how the ranking was done. 3/4 of the ranking was based off of the airspeed performance, and 1/4 of the ranking was based off of the noise performance, where they were blended together and averaged. So the Slim just is a little bit too noisy for its given airspeed to be ranked really well. So it is towards the bottom of the graphs. When we look at it at 1500 RPM, same sort of thing is going on. It's just underperforming relatively speaking, and it's well towards the bottom of the graphs. At 100% PW fan signaling, here's its noise level and how much airspeed it's generating. It's just not quite competitive overall compared to other fans. Its noise level isn't terrible, but the amount of airflow that it generates at that noise level is on the worse side of things, but it's not quite terrible. It's just got extra limitations, I guess would be fair to say with it. Taking a look at airspeed versus decibel rating, it's in line with other fans that I rank as good. And a matter of fact, it kind of, as noise levels increase, kind of sits in that group a little bit on the higher end, but it's not quite in that top tier category. So I still would call it good, but not excellent when we're taking a look at it in this airspeed versus decibel ranking. When we take a look at it in SON, it's the same sort of thing. SON is just a different way of looking at the data. We talked about that before. You can view it on my channel if you're really curious. Next graph is taking a look at CFM. CFM is just a volumetric flow rate. Most of the time, in most computer cases, volumetric flow rate is not the most important factor because directed airflow tends to be more important. But depending on what kind of case you are building into, something more compact where there's more objects in the way. So, and mini ITX case has actually got lots of things in the way. So volume in versus volume out is a pretty applicable way of looking at it. So, but anybody who says that high CFM good for case airflow doesn't know what they're talking about. But that's not to say that there isn't a case to look at CFM, which is why I do the analysis. So in the blade efficiency, the slim underperforms pretty dramatically against my control fan. And if we take a look at the noise versus CFM, same sort of thing, it is underperforming overall. So there may be better choices. When we take a look at the actual performance data, here the blue is once again the 11 decibel mark, while the red is the 18 decibel mark. The P14 Slim is just underperforming. I don't remember if I mentioned this early in the video. If you see fans that have this bracket or an and after it, something like that, it's just denoting that these fans were tested in my new house. The new house is a different room, has different carpeting. It's an overall just different environment. So there is a slight difference in that performance data. I've normalized it as best as I can and applied a correction factor. And I weighed at approximately 1 decibel difference between the two. Plus or minus. So I put the brackets on it just to denote the new environment, even though I'm considering them functionally equivalent. In case something ever happens and turns out they're not, I have a bracket system so I know where I started off. When we take a look at things at 100% pitot fan signaling, well, the Slim is ranked the worst of the fans that were selected for this graph. And noise versus CFM, it's towards the bottom. You know, we saw it already. Now we're into value proposition for this $12 fan. So value proposition is performance per dollar. It is not raw performance, but it is an aspect of performance. A fan that is cheap enough with terrible performance will perform well on this graphs, just like a fan that is absurdly expensive, if its performance is ungodly, will also rank really well on this graph, just as a comparison point. So this is a tool to determine, if you're on a budget, which fan would be the best choice to fit a tighter budget, is another way of taking a look at it. So the P14 Slim does rank actually really quite well overall. It places fairly high on the graph, but not quite at that tippy top value section. So going with a Slim fan when you need it is pretty viable here as a case airflow fan. When we take a look at it in CFM, it's a little bit more towards the middle as an average fan, but overall still not a bad position for it to be for its, well, dollar value. When we take a look at it in a CPU air cooler or radiator type environment, it is a bit towards the top. It is over average, but it's once again not at that tippy top level. So if you need a Slim fan, you need something to slap into place to get yourself airflow, and there's not a lot of room to work with, or you want to make a compact push-pull system, this could very well be the best and potentially only choice. I just haven't looked into that many other Slim 140mm class fans at this time. And that brings us to, at the end of every video, I like to show off my raw data. This data does belong to me and my channel. If you wish to use it for your own personal use, you may go ahead and do so. But if you're going to use it in any sort of written publication, written journal, anything like that, I do ask that you reference me and my channel, as I'm the one that put in the hard work. If you got suggestions on ways I can improve my videos, please leave that in the comment section down below. And some of your improvements that I've seen in the comment section have been implemented. I saw a couple comments that would like to add a little bit higher secondary noise normalized value, so I've added that into it. I've also added in fixed RPMs that I have normalized against. And I am normalizing 140s and 120s against all of these same data points, because most computer cases these days where it can fit 120 can also fit 140, and I want to compare those two directly to allow you, the viewer, to decide if you want to go 120 or 140 when I do my mid-year and end-of-year kind of roundup type videos. If you like what this channel is doing, I ask that you think about joining me as a YouTube member or Patreon. I know I mentioned it before, but I just want to say it again. It really does go a long way. This channel is free. It's unsponsored. To try to keep my opinions unbiased. I don't know how I would manage it with a sponsor at this point, because I want to keep my opinions unbiased, but I want to get this channel so that it's financially stable, I should say, so that it's at least neutral income as opposed to a negative income. But I can't do that without help from viewers like you, just down to earth, real about it. I understand that not everybody can afford to give a random person on the internet money, but hitting that subscribe button, giving me a like really does go a long way in helping support this channel, so I really do appreciate that. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you next time here on Computer Tech and More.